Welcome to the Midsters Podcast, your podcast for inspiration on being bold and saying yes to making the most out of your midlife. Well, we're talking about invisible labor. I think it's a topic that women love.
Because it's something that all women experience.
And we can recognize it because we do it. And if we're discussing it with people that don't do as much of it, I'm not saying that there are people that don't do any of it, but they don't recognize it and it just holds a different weight and a different value. And I think because women a lot of the time, I should say, carry the burden or the biggest bulk of that. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. How would you describe the invisible labor that women do?
It's everything. It's a lot of things that are done that are never noticed. But if you stop doing them, everything would come to a grinding halt. I also think of it as the thread that if it unraveled, everything would in your household. So that is kind of how I would explain it. I also look at visible labor, things that you do, as the furniture. It's visible, it's there, you need it, it functions. The invisible labor is kind of the structure that can hold all that up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a sort of a sliding scale too, because there's some things that we as women do that are kind of visible, but they're so taken for granted or so implicit in our role that other people around us don't realize how important it is.
Right.
So they may actually notice, for example, that I'm the one planning all the vacations and organizing everything. But there's not really a value to that because it's implicit that, of course, I'm going to be the one doing that.
To me, it's mental load. It's like everything going on in my head. So I'm driving and I'm thinking, okay, I know we need milk. Oh, I know that I need to call that hotel for this. It's the mental load that you carry every day. And I think about when people talk about stress. So it is stressful to get up and to have a demanding job or being in a crisis with work. All of that is stressful. And I think that a lot of our other stresses come from the burden that simmers under it that we're thinking of. It is stressful to think about, and you need to anticipate somebody else's needs, right?
I totally. I mean, I think one of the things that was always a challenge for me is, I worked the same job actually that my husband worked, right? He would stay at work until he finished what he was doing. And sometimes he would say, I've got to stay another 20 minutes because I have to finish this email or I want to get this letter done.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, in the back of my head, I can't stay another 20 minutes because I got to make dinner. I got to get the kids ready for bed. I've got bills I've got to take care of tonight. All the things that go to running the household that fell on me to make sure we're going to get done and would be present in my mind. So I had to stop what I was doing, end my day, and go home to take care of all that.
Right.
Whereas that was never part of his mental process.
Right. So it sounds like the invisible part is the thinking, the anticipating.
Exactly.
The visible was actually what you ended up doing.
Right.
Interesting enough, we all begin life dependent on invisible care. It's anticipating that baby's need for food in 2 hours. It's anticipating that for security, it's that glance and holding that eye contact. We all begin life dependent on it. And when you think about those that don't have it, it has a cascading effect. It may be abandonment issue. It's different things. It's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs that aren't visible, like the sense of security and knowing you're going to get food, right?
And that's the role that women play within an environment, not just a home environment. We could talk about this a little bit more later because I think it carries over into a work environment. But in a home environment, it's innately the woman's role to make sure that everything is functioning so that the household feels secure, functioning, reliable, and that there's a sense of well-being.
Right.
that is generated.
Well, I think the invisible labor and the emotional piece or the care piece is basically taking the responsibility and being aware of someone else's well-being, and children are the perfect example for that. Talking about children too, um everything's invisible labor to them until they need something, right? It's they just grow up, yeah, assuming everything's gonna be ready because usually mom and dad, mainly mom, has all those things done. So it's a rude awakening, I think, in their teenage years when finally, if they don't have, a clean coat or a pair of socks, you're finally saying, "Well, you know what? Go wash those."
Right, right. I think sometimes, though, they do pick up on it. I was actually cleaning out some old photographs and things,
Uh-huh.
um, that I still carried around even though we did a big purge of the household, and I found a folder from Harry's elementary school years, and it was a Mother's Day thing, and the kids were required to write a poem about their mom, and his poem was about, "My mom knows my favorite meals and always makes them for me," and that's a piece of invisible labor, and I
Mhm.
was really surprised
That's
that
sweet.
he recognized that. I wasn't just making dinner.
Yeah.
I was deliberately trying to make things my children liked and would eat. And, which, by the way, was a change from my childhood. My mom made what she wanted to make, and
Right.
we had to eat it. I really thought about what will they like, and
Yeah.
he noticed that.
Yeah.
I thought that was really kinda cool.
Thinking about children and so forth, and even me as a child and me as an adult now, and thinking about how invisible labor shows up, but the emotional regulation of things within a home or different relationships, whether it's a spousal relationship or a child relationship. You don't think at the time, not that you think it's a burden, you want to be there, you want to do that. Sometimes think people will consider someone that's nurturing as maybe that's their personality, but I do think it is the invisible labor that's identified that is needed in the home by that individual and they take it on. I happen to be a nurturing individual, but I think that I am nurturing because I am aware in my own life what needs to be done, and I do it. And the benefit from that, and I think mothers, just because we have an innate ability to sense what other people need, I think our intuition's different as well with children, as we get to benefit from that. Well, I consider it a benefit even with my adult children. So I'll get a phone call from one of my children, and they've had a really, like, not so great day. The invisible labor of being able to help them when they were children to regulate that emotion has transcended into this adult relationship as well. And guess what? The phone rings
And they
and
call.
they need, yeah, what they've had. It's because it's part of them. And the same, like, when there are times that I've called a sister, a brother, a mother, or a father for the exact same thing. So it's easy to get wrapped up and think, I have all this invisible labor. It's a horrible burden. It's a mental load. Yes, there is that piece, but also there's a gift to it as well.
There is, there is. I think some of the emotional regulation, as you put it,
Mhm.
is actually not just in the woman's relationship with other people in the household, but in helping to manage the relationships between other people in the
Yep.
household. And so I always felt, and I've actually seen this in other women, that like it was part of my role to make sure things were balanced between my children so that they would have a good relationship. And, looking for those moments where there might be some tension between them or something that might cause tension
Right.
so that they could have a harmonious relationship. And also between my children and my spouse. And I've actually seen that there's a family member, I'm not going to identify who it is, but I have seen her masterfully handle that piece where, her husband is a hard line, you must do this, you must do that, you must do this.
Yeah.
And her kids don't react well to that. And I've been in her presence when she has very artfully shifted the conversation so that, she's almost translating what her husband is saying to soften it so that the kids don't immediately bristle, and then translating their reaction to it back to her husband so that he feels like he is being respected and honored even though the kids are bristling. And that artful, I don't want to say manipulation, but it is manipulation of the situation to make sure it doesn't go awry, that
You know,
there's not a fight, that there's not a flare up. That is the kind of skill that women have within a household.
When you're telling that story, one word pops into my head, and basically it's survival. She has learned and artfully put together those techniques that the family can survive in without chaos, without conflict, without everything going down the tubes, because she values what she has. And that invisible labor is so important, but it's also it sounds like it's for survival of a healthy household as well. And people don't realize those invisible things and the tasks that we take on that are emotional or that people take on. I'm not just saying that women and men take that on. We all do, but it also becomes very innate in us. And I'd be interested in hearing your perspective if you think that certain personalities are able to masterfully do that more than other personalities.
I'm gonna jump back on that,
Yeah.
but I do wanna say one other thing. It
Mhm.
is a survival mechanism, but it's more than that because I don't wanna leave the impression that there's a negative dynamic there.
Right.
What I think
And I
is
didn't mean it like
Yeah, yeah.
that,
What
but
I think is very positive about it is another piece of invisible labor that women do is we're teachers,
yeah.
and we're teaching people implicitly how to temper their reactions so that, they're communicating better,
Right.
or maybe how to temper their reactions so that they're not getting all emotionally caught up in something, but can step back and give it some space. We innately do that for the people around us
Mhm.
and model that behavior.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important piece of a community dynamic that women
Right.
have.
Well, it's definitely a strength too to be able to do that. So when we talk about invisible labor, I mean, sometimes when we say that, it sounds like it's all a burden too. But we ourselves benefit from that so much. And sometimes I think we can artfully do it to where we feel accomplished in the fact that we are living in an environment that is easier for us as well. Does that
Mhm.
make sense? So
Mhm.
I don't wanna say it's all, like, one-sided, I don't like to do this. It's for me too. It benefits all of us. I remember my husband trying to start a business, and I knew he had a hard day, and things didn't work out, and then I have these 2 boys, and one of them is just, chaotic, and I at one point or at many points, and it's like, "Okay, your dad has had a hard day. Here's some great things I think you should tell him to lift his spirits." It's all of that.
Mhm.
It's all of that.
The interesting thing is ability that women have
Mhm.
to sort of carry the emotional load, that do the silent work, it carries over from the house into the workplace. And I've noticed that for many years in my own particular work experience, but there are definitely studies about this as well. In my last job, we led very sedentary lives, and we were people would call it monastic because everyone would be in their office writing all day
Mhm.
on their reports, and there wasn't a whole lot of interaction. And it was one of the women in the office who said, "Okay, we have to change this. So I'm gonna declare Thursday our lunch day." And we named it after her, Carmen's Cafe.
Mhm.
And every Thursday, we would just all meet in the cafe to have the cafe was just the workroom,
Yeah.
to have lunch together. Everybody brown bag to lunch. It's a simple thing, but it
Right.
was a woman who thought of that, who said, "We need to do this." And it was also inevitably every year the women who planned the Christmas party.
Yeah.
There would be men participating, but it was the women who took the initiative to get it done. So creating that team building environment, that connection and relationship, just like we do in the home, we were also doing at work.
Well, I think that also it's a sense of awareness of what's needed. So they're picking up on the social skills, the things that are needed for the vibe in the office, for that teamwork. So I think of awareness and anticipation is a big piece to that. I think that also women tend not to be as myopic in their thinking, which is very beneficial because they are not just thinking about sitting there and actually getting that task done. It's all that other noise in their head,
Mhm.
that is often just innate, and some of it's personality. We can go back to that. But yeah, I think really we have awareness of something much bigger than that tunnel vision or that myopic thing in the office as I'm coming to do my job from 9 to 5, and that's all it is. It is the women. I'm a nurse, so I worked mainly with women. So we all were on top of that, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And there were other individuals that benefited from that, but also very appreciative to it.
I know that I've seen studies that say that in corporate America,
Mhm.
companies that have embraced female leadership and particularly, engage women in the process of making major decisions have better outcomes.
Yeah.
And it's because women look at problems differently. All these skills that we've learned about how to sort of manage and regulate and do this invisible emotional work
Yeah.
play out really well in the workplace because we bring a different perspective to problem solving.
Mhm.
It's more collaborative, it's more anticipatory, it looks ahead to see what problems might
Yeah.
arise. They're the same skills we're
It's
using at home.
anticipatory. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But when you bring them into the workplace, they create great
Yeah.
outcomes. So, you talked about or asked me a question about what kind of personality I think is kind of best at doing take on this invisible labor.
Right.
It's the women who embrace it
Yeah.
and don't try to push it aside. I don't want to have to do that work.
Mhm.
Actually, it's good for you to learn how to do that. It expands your mind.
Right.
It benefits people around you, but it benefits you.
Right. Yeah, I think that personality has a little bit to do with it, on what they're able to do. I think some people, invisible labor would be very intense for them to take all of it on, and I think if someone does not feel like they could, it would take the personality of an individual to be able to share a lot of that invisible labor with their spouse. So you're direct. I think also it takes a lot of self-awareness. So personality-wise, I think somebody that has a self-awareness of knowing. I talk to people too that discuss things going on in their life, and they're definitely flagged as the invisible labor, but that tends to be what causes a lot of stress. And so learning to be able to know what you can take on and what you can't take on and what you can share with somebody else, I think is important. And also talking about women in general and the invisible labor and whether it's a home environment or a work environment, I believe that we bring the softness with our invisible labor to situations all the time. You can call it nurture, you can call it love, you can call it the softness, but it takes the edge out of living on a day-to-day basis. I think it takes the edge off of or takes the edge out of society in general as well. It's not so hard-edged, and a lot of that is invisible. It is, it's an environment that you create that you don't see, but you sense.
Mhm.
You walk in a room and you sense it, and it's the invisible. Like I said, it might be the hugs, it might be the feeling that you get that somebody's put in the effort and has your back. You know that they have your back because what you feel and your well-being matters to them. So I think it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's both, right?
I think it's a lost opportunity for men.
I would agree.
I was actually listening to a podcast this morning on the way in, and the guy who was doing the podcast was talking. It was kind of related to this. I thought it was sort of fortuitous that this came on, but he was talking about how women have learned to lean into not just the feminine side of themselves, but the masculine side.
Mm,
So the softness, the
mhm.
listening, the nurturing, but also the doing, the tackling.
Yeah,
Women have done a fairly good job of integrating both parts into the way we conduct ourselves in the world today. Men have not because they're afraid of the feminine, that they're afraid it will somehow reduce their masculinity to be softer. And I think that's a missed opportunity for
yeah,
men because that ability to sort of integrate differently in a household, it actually is a good thing
mhm.
and it feels good. I kind of like knowing that the tone of my household is what I want it to be
Yeah,
because I'm there behind the scenes
yeah,
doing everything to keep
yeah,
it that way.
yeah. I think that, talking about the male-female in that perspective is and maybe not all men, but it's a self-awareness. I just don't think that they're self-aware of what they that can do for them. I mean, a lot
Mhm.
of it's what society demands or what has passed on generation to generation. I think when men started coming into staying in the home and sharing the duties, or sometimes there was a stay-home dad. I There was one down the street for like 7 or 8 years that had 6 children, And I remember when I first met them, they had adopted 2 children. By the time they left, they had 6. And I remember, like, very I don't wanna say cutthroat, but the way he interacted and kind of ran the household when he was leaving his work to do that, to 8 years later, the softness that the caretaking and being around children, um, shifted him, changed him. So maybe women, we see it more because we tend to be the child the main child carer, I guess you would say, if that's a word, and not men. But I think more and more as men move into that, they will soften. I see it now with the stay-home dads or dads that are much hands-on. There is a softness. So I think some of it would be considered environmental as well, because that would be an environment piece that changes.
There's also an appreciation, right,
Mhm.
for all of the stuff that they don't really see us doing.
Right.
Just the thought of what is the week of meals gonna look like so that everyone's having a sort of nutritional, well-balanced thing.
Yeah.
How am I gonna make sure everybody gets all their work done before they go off to their sports events? How do I get everybody in bed on time? All of that, when men take on more of that role, they
Mhm.
start to see their children differently, they see their spouse differently,
Yeah.
and I just think it deepens the relationships.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we should talk about invisible labor and mental load without at least mentioning and talking a little bit about ways that we can help ourselves and help others get through the stress of all that. So, yeah, I mean, you're sitting there and I go to bed at night and I've got a million things in my head. So, what are some ways that you have been able to tap into that allows you to be able to release some of that and not feel like you have too much of a burden in all that invisible work? How do you handle that without, like, because we don't vocalize it. I don't, like, run the whole list that goes into my head so somebody knows that it's being done. I don't do that. I take it on myself and then figure out ways to lower my stress, because when people have heart attacks and things like that, yeah, a lot of it has to do with health, but a lot of people or physicians will say it is stress. But when you're in a doctor's office and they're like, "You need to be less stressful," they think about the visible things to take off your plate, not the invisible.
That's an
And the
excellent point.
mental health piece of it is is so important. So when I hear people are under stress, usually there's a horrible illness there are big things going on that they have consumed the mental burden of worrying about it. So I think that it's worth a few minutes, and we're probably towards the end of our episode, but I think maybe finishing it on something like that.
So I have a very good friend
Uh-huh.
who has frequently said, "We are all married to the same man. He just has different names." And what she means by that is, my gosh, they all do the same thing. They totally take for granted all the stuff that we're doing on
Right.
top of our work and, all that invisible labor. I have always found it very helpful to know that my sisters in the world are going through the same thing.
Right.
And I vent often at coffee clutches or, you know, evening glasses of wine with my girlfriends. And it turns it from a stressor into something humorous.
Yeah.
And we laugh about it. And I think that that helps a lot. Sharing with other women that this is kind of a mutual experience, and then telling the more ridiculous stories
Right.
of the things that get overlooked, that's really helpful to me.
Yeah.
I think a second thing that's always been really helpful to me is kind of keeping an awareness that this is a stage. That the bulk of the work that I did, now that I'm old, I'm older, I'm
Right.
retired, my kids are out of the house, that's all gone,
Mhm.
right? Um, and over time, just introducing certain things to my husband to get him to do more things, he has taken on more of a role. And I think that's been good for him. It's been good for me. And it's led to a place where now I think we're actually relatively even in
Yeah.
how we handle the burden of the house and communicating with our adult kids. So it's a process and it is not constant. It is shifting because as the kids age, the needs change,
Yeah.
as your relationship matures, your ability to communicate changes. So seeing it as a process over time has been very helpful to me.
One of the things that has always helped me with it is exercise. I like putting in my ear pods and lifting weights or running or walking, and that is what's in my head, or kind of those things. So then I'm readily available for my family, and I'm not going through that list. The one thing that I wish I knew then that I know now, that when I would try to emotionally regulate things, the positives that would come out of that. Like, I love the relationship that it built, me being my doing that in my relationships with my children today. I love that. I also don't want to, even though this is about midlife and about women and our invisible labor, men have invisible labor too. So I don't want to be ignorant in that at all. I know that my husband, I can say, his invisible labor, he thinks about having to provide for us and being that role model for his sons. So I'm not saying that men don't have invisible labor. They do. It just shows up different.
I think that's a good point, and I will say, I think one thing my husband has had to labor at invisibly, you have 2 sons. I have a son and a daughter,
Right.
and that father-daughter relationship is a really important relationship, but he's a man, and he thinks like a man,
Right.
and she is very much a woman who thinks like a woman, and he has had to learn how to, like, see things from her point of view. And we have incredible conversations sometimes, or they have incredible conversations, where I can actually see his point of view shifting because he is taking into account what she's telling him about her lived experience,
Yeah.
which is very different than
Yeah.
his lived experience.
Well, on the opposite side, that's how I lived, because I had 2 boys, so total different gender, and I had to figure that piece out too.
I found it easier for me vis-a-vis my son because
Yeah.
as a mom, we're just there
Yeah.
listening and nurturing. It for me, I thought it was more of a challenge for Dave,
Yeah.
and he embraced it, which was great. But watching it was really interesting to me,
Right.
and seeing that movement in him. Like, I can say things to him about my lived experience as a woman that he doesn't take the same way
Right.
as he takes it when she tells him.
Yeah.
It's just kind of an interesting
Yeah,
thing.
no, that is. We always like asking you questions, Elizabeth. Do you have any for us?
How do you start the conversation about redistributing invisible labor without it turning into a fight with your partner?
Well, you use the invisible labor of that emotional regulation to begin with. And then I don't think it's running off to-do lists. It's not a competition. We're not getting paid for it, right? I think a good way to approach it would be, if these things didn't get done, who would do them? I mean, I think that would be it. But I think it's actually just softening, going into it and letting them recognize, or just stop doing it and see what happens. That would have some humor to it.
It works too. I think a piece of it is not just saying, I need you to do this, or this needs to be done, and I'm doing it, but phrasing it in such a way that you are educating is probably not the right word, but um, giving your spouse some reason to want to do it by showing them what the benefit to them would be. So, hey, I need you to take this on. Just sounds like I'm shifting my work to you. And they're already feeling like they're already doing things, right? But, this is coming up with the kids, and it might be a really great opportunity for you to have some one on one time with them and sort of see their life from their perspective. So, why don't you be the one who signs up for that? Because I get to do that all the time, and it's really great for me. I want you to have a share in that. So, present it to your spouse as a positive, because honestly, a lot of this stuff really is. Same thing even with cooking, like, right? My mom, this used to crack me up. My mom would get mad at me. She would call me almost every day the first 5 years I was married at 6:30 and ask, "What did you make for dinner?" And I'd be like, "Mom, I literally just got home from work. I haven't even cooked yet." "Your husband should have a hot dinner on the stove at 6 o'clock every night." Well, that's not gonna happen because 'cause I'm still at work at 6 o'clock, right? It was that expectation, and, not that he had that expectation, but that was something I needed to shift. So, "Hey, I know I always make what I like for dinner. Why don't you make dinner tonight? Make something that you like. Why don't you experiment with a recipe?" It's a more positive way of getting them to buy into the idea that they should be doing some of that work.
Great. Yeah. I have another question. And this is for like our listeners. So, for someone listening who feels buried under their own invisible labor right now, what do you think is one small shift that they can make this week?
Carve out time for yourself, even if it means letting something go. Not everything we take on has to be done right then, that way. Sometimes you can say, I'm just not going to do this today. Maybe you really don't need to do the laundry. Let it pile up. Not to teach a lesson, but because you just don't have time for it. And instead, go take yourself to get your nails done. You know? I mean, prioritize in some small way, spending some time for yourself, even if it means letting some of the things that you implicitly do around the house go.
So I think it fits the mental load, the invisible labor. I think that doing something that would take them out of thinking about those things, whether it's going for a run, Leslie Anna just mentioned going and get their nails done, doing something for themselves. But also, I think it's important to learn techniques to be able to stop that noise in your head. I think that it probably starts right there. So journaling would even help. A lot of the meditation would help. So I would say pick up a habit that could be a lifelong habit that would actually take them out of that mental load headspace for even 45 minutes. I hope that when you think about invisible labor, you'll also think of ways to allow yourself to be stress free in it all and maybe share it with someone else in the household.